Roll call, please.
Alderman Weggie.
Here.
Alderman Erger.
Here.
Alderman Gould.
Here.
Alderwoman Tice. Here. All members present.
Okay. Move on to approval of the agenda. Any modifications, questions? If not, seeing approval by acclamation. Moving to citizen comments.
There's no one online.
Great. I don't see anybody in the room. Going to report of committee chair and alderman. The only thing I have is, I think this is more just informational, but I think it's time that we start talking about the location of the new Public Works building. There were a couple months ago, and I was trying to find it, and I wasn't able to find it, an investigation of potential locations with Green Street being approved. I think that needs to move on to the front burner. So just as an awareness that I plan to start pushing that through this committee of what we need to do, especially in terms of budgeting for next year, for any studies or whatever we need to do. I'm just worried we're going to get caught with having to do something very quickly if we don't move out on that. So just for awareness. That's all I have. Sullivan?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Jeff?
No report.
Nancy?
No report.
Okay. Move into department reports.
Hello. Got a couple quick updates here, just kind of a smattering of things. The Manchester Road crosswalk that, the mid-block crossings of Manchester, that is. So there's, one in Cecilia, there's one closer to Manderley. There's several of them along the corridor. It's not just in Brentwood, but one of the questions we were asked was, are they put in correctly? So they are put in according to MoDOT's plans, and they did follow MUTCD and PROAG and all those different guidelines. However, the question still is that people don't yield to the people that press the button. I know they work, or at least the one at Cecilia we tried. We pressed it and it lights up and it goes back and forth just like the one at Memorial Park over to the YMCA on Strassner. So MoDOT's looking at possibly putting in additional warning beacons that would be at the advanced warning signs. So not right at the crosswalk, those are the rapid flash beacons, but upstream of each of those, they were getting cost proposals for solar lights. So if you put lights on top of lights, the theory would go that people should see it and see the people in the crosswalk. Whether that happens or not, I don't know, but we will know more in the next MoDOT meeting, either next week or the week after.
Those additional lights, is that still MUTCD compliant?
They would be, yeah. Yeah, what they put in is manufactured by TAPCO, which is who we've purchased through before. So it's a standard type thing. It's just a matter of, well, do they want to absorb that additional cost at multiple locations? And then an electrician could put it up and it would work.
Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are good, especially for the ones that are, the markings on the street are fairly visible from as you approach either direction. I think the one that is at Manderley and high school is significant concern because where they installed it and the way that the hill crest is, there's, as you're coming up from the east to the west driving, there's a little bit of a hill crest just before it, and it kind of dips down and then it goes a little higher, and that's right where they put the crosswalk. So you really don't see the markings of the crosswalk until you're almost right on it.
Right.
And then same as you're coming over the hill from the west to the east, you're really not visible. Those markings on the pavement are not visible, even in a good lighting. I think that's a bigger concern than just adding additional warning lights.
Right.
How do we make sure that either maybe that wasn't the best place for it, or is there something else that can be done to make some extra lighting on the crosswalk itself? Or I think that one's of a significant concern. The ones that are further down the Manchester corridor, you see those, the markings. So I think extra warning lights are going to be good to help people know, like, hey, it's been activated, pay attention, So those are just my concerns. I don't know if you need to, again, go back and talk to MoDOT. The sight line for the actual crosswalk itself is bad.
They're supposed to be looking at sight lines too. Like, I know we had alerted them, like over by the, a chiropractic center that's on Manderley, near, just to the west of the Schnooks.
Right.
that the limbs were blocking that sign.
Right.
And then they trimmed them. It's like, well, you know, probably should have checked that before you activated it, you know, anywhere along there, whether it's, you know, a street light or it's a tree limb, whatever. It's like if something's being blocked or there's a visual impairment, you know, created by something, you know, take care of it.
Okay.
Nancy?
So I don't know if it would have any impact with MoDOT, but I think particularly that Manderley one, there are presumably students who might use that crosswalk to walk across and get to school. And that just seems like something that we need to do everything we can to make safe for those using it.
So do we think that the additional flashing lights on that crossing are not going to be sufficient? I mean, just to clearly articulate it.
I mean,
It's not enough.
I don't have any evidence, but I just, you know, that will help warn drivers before they get to the other flashing signs that are basically right at the crosswalk, that to look for something. But especially with morning sun and then evening sun in your face, doesn't matter how many lights you're going to have. If you can't see the crosswalk until you're right on it, how do you know to stop? So I just have concerns of, and again, that's not something maybe on paper when they were looking at the plans
Right.
that, you know, they would have been able to see, because you don't look at elevations necessarily. I mean, but in the field now you can see it's, especially if you're driving. Yeah, I mean,
I know they're going to meet with the designers just like we did with the tunnel where it was the water issue. You know, first they thought they corrected it, and then, you know, when they went out there and they measured slope, then we have ADA issues. So I know some of those porous blocks are going to have to be removed and try to re-level it. And then Van Mark Way, where it comes across and ties into Dorothy, that's at the wrong angle too,
Right.
as far as slope for ADA.
yeah,
So that's going to have to be reworked, because they asked me about the island. Do you want the island, you know, that little divider that makes kind of like a little triangle? Do you want it left in or out? And I was like, well, it's up to you. If it's up to me, I would remove it. I don't really see a strong need for it. It's one more thing that we have to worry about in the future of replacing. We put posts on the end of it just because we thought, well, going into winter, you get a significant snow and you don't see the end of that, and you're running with a plow blade, you're going to do damage to the blade in the truck if you clip that thing.
yeah. I mean, the reason that was done, I think, was to help try to divert traffic to
Right.
Manchester, not cutting through the streets. So,
Right. The problem we've seen is that whoever picks up the dumpsters for the apartments drives over it. I mean, there's black marks all over the thing, and eventually it's going to be enough weight to punish it and start cracking it up. And then it'll be out of warranty, and then we'll be stuck fixing it. It's not the end of the world to have to fix it, but it'd be nice to fix it when it's that new.
Okay, so it sounds like for the western crossing, we're going to talk to MoDOT about
Yeah, I'll put it
sight
on the
lines
agenda.
and,
We have a weekly meeting with them and just ask, did you ever discover what was good, bad, indifferent with the sight lines?
Okay.
With the beacons? And that way we can put it in the weekly report or something to.
and then we feel that the additional beacons on the eastern ones are okay because of the sight lines.
I mean, it will help for sure.
Okay, thanks.
The Dorothy Avenue, I'm sure you've seen it if you have driven Dorothy, but just north of Manchester, it had the improper speed limit of 30. Their sign shop finally made up the one with 20 with the black backing on it that matches the rest of the signs. So that was done a couple weeks ago, so that's good. Bullet number 3, or item number 3, to share the road bike markings on Litzinger. We plan on doing that after the Hoffman Brothers crosswalk, which is the next item, item 4. Just because we've spoken with Hoffman Brothers, we're trying to get them to mark out, or actually their engineer to mark out the sidewalk slabs that need to be cut out so we can put in those ramps. Because we want to get that done since it's concrete work and it's more temperature dependent than the paint. Those two should be done here shortly.
Hey, Dan, on number 3, the Litzinger street and sidewalk repairs, does that include I know we talked to the school about some issues right there by McGrath on Litzinger. Does that include that repair as well?
That doesn't, that's actually in the 24 budget. That's one of the lines in there. If you're talking about like the
The dirt-
sidewalk and the
dirt that
curb
was
and- yeah,
going away?
Yep.
Okay, that's in the 2020, okay.
It is, yep.
Thank you.
Item 5, stormwater master plan. Gonzalez is still working on that bid package. They're doing design drawings, so nothing new to report there other than they'll eventually give us probably either 60 or 90% to review. So I'll check with Tony Schenk with Gonzalez and see where they are with that. Russell Avenue STP, if you go to the city's website, MoDOT, the county, and we're advertising those bid packages. So that's for your shared use path on the north side of Russell between Bremerton and Brentwood Boulevard. It's also for the new traffic lights on Brentwood Boulevard, you know, the crossing arms and everything at the railroad crossing. Long story short, you know, bids will be opened up on September 28th. Then for the October meeting, we'll be bringing those bids back here. And then MoDOT will be reviewing them too. So once we get MoDOT's concurrence, you know, we can work simultaneously, run it through county or run it through our committee, then through the board. And then as soon as they give us the final green light, then we can do a notice to proceed. So we should be getting a contractor on board to start that work here at the end of '23. Turn it up and making it better in '24, so that'll be good. The sealant projects, 2023 sealant projects, Donaldson actually moved their equipment in today, so hopefully it won't rain, I guess, for the next couple days, because it is weather dependent. You know, it doesn't take long to cure. Like, once they clean the surface, put that sealant down, it's usually an hour, like 45 minutes to an hour, depending on temperature and humidity. So they should be able to get some of these streets knocked out if there's a dry period, which I don't think it's like an all-day rain or anything. I think we're going to be good. And then lastly, Parkside Drive, this 9424. I had a resident contact me who actually contacted the Ward 1 folks. They've got an issue with runoff coming from McKnight. It runs from, you know, the crown, you know, the center part of the road, goes down the edge, and then they're on, you know, the Brentwood side, the east side of the road. It runs down their apron, down the driveway, and they've got a garage that's under the home. So they actually created a little berm in front of their garage door, and it slows the water down. There's a drain that's in the driveway, and it usually can, you know, accommodate the rain. If it rains too much, then the drain can't take it. It goes over the berm and into the home. So they had asked if there was anything we could do or if it could be added to the stormwater report. I know at a past meeting we talked about keeping the stormwater report where we would add other addresses and things of that nature. What we could do in the interim before we would have Gonzalez or somebody study it is we could create our own berm on the sidewalk, or not on the sidewalk, but behind the sidewalk. So you could create what they've already created, but create it closer to McKnight. You know, maybe like an inch or so. It'd be pretty shallow, but if the water's gradual and slow, it would hit that and then deflect and go around. Because there's no curb there in the sense that it's not a 6-inch vertical curb. And even if there would be, you've got the cut for the apron. And again, the garage is lower than McKnight elevation. So, I mean, water goes from high to low. But we wanted to try to help them out a little bit if we could. We can stay within the right-of-way, provide a little bit of a, you know, solution until this is addressed, I guess, in a more engineering-like fashion. I don't know if anybody wants to discuss it further. I know we put a little picture, like with a little bit of clip art there, and, you know, kind of show what the area we're talking about possibly doing something.
Hey, Nancy.
So I was the one who was really adamant that last year we should not do anything until it got on the list. This is a little of a different situation because this is our Pawnee Eagleton situation that once Ladue, aka Eagleton, paved their side of the road, and then more water is now coming down onto the Brentwood side and going in there. So the homeowner was indicating that since the repavement happened, there is more of a water runoff. So, I mean, I think it'd be great if we could do something, but I also appreciate my stance the last time, so I will.
I mean, are you just, I had a similar situation on Mary, and then before my apron is now above the street level. But are you talking about just going and pouring a little bit of the asphalt and creating
like
a
what
little
we did
bit of
along
a?
there, exactly. So it'd just be that type of asphalt where we would just put some tack coat down, maybe, I guess, 6 inches to a foot wide, but like an inch high. And it would be shallow enough that her vehicles can go in and out of the garage, but high enough that under a normal rain, you know, not an intense one, obviously, it would slow it down. So you maybe it reduces the probability of flooding, you know, some decent percentage.
And that won't.
And it wouldn't cost a lot of money.
And it's kind of hard to tell from the picture here, but that won't create a pooling effect for the sidewalk, right? Any water that doesn't, it'll still run down the street then?
It should, and we thought, well, if it makes it worse somewhere else, it's easily removed. You know, it's just a tack coat, so it's like a binder, you know,
Yeah.
or an epoxy type. You know, so you could actually take a blade and scoop it right off the concrete if it made it worse. What's weird is if you go just to the north of that home, there's a graded inlet, but it has no curbing around it. It's just kind of there. So it's just weird placement. As an engineer, you really wouldn't want it there, but I
Yeah.
don't know how it got there.
Yeah.
And that street, Parkside, does not have normal like inlets, you know, curb inlets on either side closer to McKnight, which is what, you know, if you were to design it today's day and age, you would put those in, just because as the water would sheet away from McKnight, it would go into those and convey somewhere else.
And then, as far as to Alderwoman Tice's point, do we know that the crown was put in correctly
That I
for
don't
the
know, because
Ladue
I know
side?
that they did grade
In
it.
that
Yeah.
they didn't inadvertently create something that actually runs more stormwater down the Brentwood
They
side?
could have, because, you know, they did at least to the center line, and there's
Yeah.
new striping there, and then they did all the way over to the Ladue side. So I'm like, well, just a few millimeters
Right.
in the middle, when you run that out, that horizontal distance, it is going to change the slope, even if it's very small.
I mean, I think we need to check that, because if it
Yeah.
wasn't, because that
Because we don't know what it
creates-
was before they did any of the paving. We can, you know, check grades and slopes now, but, you know, not knowing what the original condition was, I don't know how much they changed it, if they changed it.
To appear that it was the same road. And, I mean, maybe it was done, I don't know if it's
Yeah.
done once upon a time at the same time and
I think it was long time ago.
long time ago, and then Ladue came in and added their stuff, so it's definitely a little higher. I mean, I'm no engineer, I can just, like, when you walk across it, it's just.
And for 24, we want to do our
Right.
microsurfacing improvements too, so maybe it'll make it better because it'll be more symmetric. You know, that's the theory at least.
Is this berm going to be on their property or is that in the right
It
of
would be
way?
on our property because I looked at the county assessor's map and there's right of way behind the sidewalk several feet. So it's like you're just putting it in the transition between their apron and the sidewalk, but not actually on the sidewalk per se. So people walking there won't trip over it because it's off of the sidewalk. It's more on the edge of their apron. But it was just a quick, you know, idea that we had. It's like, well, they're not on the list, but they do have a problem. You know, do we want to create a new list of new
And-
problems and have them re-ranked?
And you couldn't put it, you wouldn't want to put it at the edge of the street, right at the edge of the,
We can look at that again, like take measurements on it, because that was another idea.
because you're
is
worried about maybe that becoming a trip hazard for
That's
the
kind of what
sidewalk.
we thought if somebody's walking across there and they step across that apron and they don't see that at night, you know, like Winter Wonderland or something was where I thought there could be a problem. Because the only other idea I had for her is like, well, it would be a private solution, but you'd have to put in like a slotted drain or a bigger drain and then pipe that to the
Yeah,
backyard.
again, that's something I think we don't,
Yeah.
a interim fix to help alleviate the problem, but this probably does need to become part of the list.
Correct.
Um,
I just didn't want to leapfrog it in the order when there's others on the list.
How much material cost and labor do you anticipate this?
We were thinking it'd probably be like $200. You know, we're gonna be doing asphalt work anyways, so we would just put a little bit extra on the truck, feather that in when you're done doing the other stuff, because I know we're working on Park Ridge, you know, that slab around that manhole. We've got a couple other asphalt jobs. We just did Stratford, that big sinkhole. There's a sinkhole in York that's still tied to a sewer dig. I think it's number 32, 35, somewhere around there, York. So we thought, well, we would just, if you wanted us to do it, we would work it in with other asphalt jobs, and it's not gonna cost anything extra because it's gonna be part of that truckload. It's just sending guys from one job to the next, put it down, roll it, and you're done.
I've experienced this before. I know how concerning it is to have, every time it rains, to feel like there's water going to be coming into your garage. So, I mean, if it's minimal cost that you say, I would make a motion that we do the interim berm to try to help alleviate the issue.
Second.
All right, any other conversation, question? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Hey, Dan, one question on Hoffman Brothers. So that's Brentwood Public Works people that'll be doing that work? Or are
Yes.
we bringing
Yeah, we've
somebody
already
else?
got the signs and everything, but it's just a matter of, the only thing we have to buy are the truncated domes, you know, the little tactile strip that you would see at like ADA ramps. But we wanted them to mark it. We've got the plans, we just want to know exactly where in the field that goes in. That way we can base everything from that. I said, or give us an offset stake where it's 3 feet away from where that edge is.
Okay, and that's a rolled curb, so it's not.
It is, so that has to be cut out. So it's like you're gonna cut it out, make it more of a gradual ramp, and then the tactile strip, and then you'll have advanced warning signs for crosswalk.
Great.
And then we'll
fantastic.
put those white continental rectangles in too, melt those on or paint them, because it's concrete.
And the deal we had there is we were splitting the cost with Hoffman on that.
We are, yeah. So whatever the design is, he's paid all that up front. Whatever my costs are, I'll keep a itemized list, put the two together, divide equitably, and
Question on the share the road. As far as timing goes, is that something you think we're going to be able to still get in this year?
yeah, because some of it's just signs. So it's just calling in locates, pounding in a signpost, putting that warning diamond in, you know, it's like a.
Do we have to wait to do all of it? Can we get at least the signs going?
We could do that, we could do the signs and then the painting as a separate thing.
Because I know you know, the person who brought this to our attention and others who ride their bikes have had contacted me and said that they get yelled at a lot. And they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then especially, I think, compounding it with more traffic that's on Litzinger with the schools, you know, angry drivers don't think that bikers should be on the road, and they start yelling and kind of getting a little close to them.
Right.
I think that this is something we need to have, even if we need to just put signs up now and then do paint later, I think sooner we do this, the better.
Yeah, because there's, I believe, I want to say either 11 or 12 signs from high school going to McKnight. You know, you could call it in block by block and just, you know, that would be your filler work and then do the painting all at once.
Right.
Because that's going to depend on how much traffic's there too. I mean, you probably have to go either early in the morning or late in the afternoon, but not so late that they're doing dismissal. We're going to have probably a limited window as to when we can.
All right, any other questions for Dan? All right, thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to Susquehanna.
So, nothing in board docs, but Suscom is working on priorities for next year based on the sustainability plan. And so that will be kind of the big topic of our next conversation of our next committee meeting. Besides that, NOMO April is later on the agenda, so.
I do have one thing on Suscom too. You know, when we joined the Midwest Climate Consortium, one of those ideas is that, you know, there might be an opportunity to get some free analysis. So there has been some conversations with WashU that one of their sustainability classes might do a project around Brentwood. So we're getting understanding to make sure we're not, you know, going to overload anybody, what kind of information they want. So that's going to be coming over to you as well. So Andy Burkamper's been talking to a professor there about that.
Great, that's exciting. We could talk
Free,
about that.
free analysis.
Yeah, I think we talked about that 4 or 5 months ago, so it's kind of great that
Yeah.
it shows us.
And that would be an opportunity, you know, if anybody wants to come in the outbrief, that'll be in December. We'll share those dates too, to just see what they come up with. Thanks, sir.
Welcome.
All right, Parks and Rec.
So I do have a few things for Parks and Rec. The first is my favorite topic, geese. They have decreased. I will say that from prior to opening the park to now, we have seen a considerable decrease in geese. A considerable decrease, more importantly, of poop on our trails. There's still some, and there's still geese in the park. One of the things that came out of the contractor or construction of Phase 1 and Phase 2 is Al Keeley is responsible for monitoring it, and they're making a claim that it is putting a lot of pressure and damage on the landscaping due to waterfowl. Their job is to report it. The city's job is to try to mitigate it. And obviously, we're going to try to take care of the situation because of other things going on in Phase 1 and Phase 2. So What we did was we met with a representative with the United States Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services, Wildlife Services. Whew. It's a long one. And to talk about a management project, a wildlife damage management project. So it's something that they can do. We've kind of talked to them about all the things we had been doing, and they said that at this point they can come in. They gave us a fee of $2,500 as a starting point. They think it'll take us through egg and nest destruction next year. And so it's kind of a starting point, not to exceed agreement. So we've moved forward with that, and we'll get them out there on site. It's something we can easily fit into our contractual expenditure account line. So we're happy to get moving on this. I actually said, you know, if you do well, I have a gateway fountain that I might be talking to you about as well. So I'm excited about working on this one. Next is landscaping. Alderman Gould, Bull, and I were kind of talking about this a little bit, and I think it's interesting. What we know in the city and what other people might know is a little bit different. And for those who aren't familiar, we have a number of landscape agreements, which is basically saying it's basically 1 or 3 year agreements of maintaining the landscaping until the city has to take over it. And if you look, phase 1, which is kind of the first project we ever did, we had a 3-year agreement with. And so DJM, who's their subcontractor, will be out there and has been out there. We see them on a weekly basis, not watering as much anymore, but the last time we saw them, they're mowing, they're cutting down some of the high grass and maintaining that, which is great. Phase 2 only has a 1-year agreement. GRG Part A has a 1-year maintenance agreement. That's ideal contracting. We have seen them out there. They're out there, they're weeding, they're mowing weekly, they're doing a really nice job. The part I'm excited about now it's cooling down is they really have to oversee those natural areas around the lake. Those did not take, and so that's going to be their big job is to make sure that those come in and we oversee that. So we're talking to them, and they should be doing it within the next month, so middle of October. GRGB, we're about to go out to bid. To be honest, this will not have a landscape agreement, mainly because we have dollars with MoDOT, and because we have to close out that project to get reimbursed. We don't want to have a year to wait to get that $1 million reimbursement because the project is still out. So that makes a lot of sense, and that's why we do it. The MoDOT improvement project, so that is everything around Manchester Road, and then more importantly, the tunnel. Dan kind of talked about some of that. That was KCI. There was not, since MoDOT did that project, there was not a landscaping agreement. So we are taking that over as soon as they gave final acceptance. To be blunt, KCI did not do a very good job maintaining it near the end. MoDOT has given them final acceptance, so we have started taking that over, and we've started maintaining that landscaping. It's probably not perfect, but it's a lot better than what it was. It's interesting we're doing that while they're doing punch list items related to the drainage issue, so we're kind of working around them. They're working around us. But it is what it is, and so we're working on that right now. Vet Pavilion, again, did not have that. They took over after we've took over establishment, so we've been mowing and doing all that stuff. And then Destination Playground does not include one either. So as soon as it gets established, final acceptance, we'll take that over. That will be even more fun because we hope to get that playground open this year, but most likely we won't be able to get landscaping until next year. So we'll still see contractors in the park. So there's a lot of moving pieces on right now. It's a lot of fun for me. And we figured out, my staff is really doing a nice job making sure that they do the best they can and make sure the contractors are doing their job. So the real question is, how do we communicate that to other people? And so they know people are coming in, and we kind of brainstorm a few ideas. The most logical place to do it is put it on the Brentwood bound page of the city's website. And there's an FAQ page, and we can put a note at the bottom. I think, not surprisingly, we've seen the analytics on that page dropping. People aren't going to that page as much, the project's done. And so that's probably maybe not, while it's the most logical place to put it, it probably won't be seen the most at that place. So I think we're going to focus on some social media push on making sure people understanding that they should still see contractors in the park. You know, we won't go specifically what I just laid out in front of you, but I think we'll kind of say, hey, just so you know, we have different landscape agreements, so you'll see contractors out there for the next 3 years, and don't be worried, it's just part of everything. So we'll work on that messaging, and Sean's working on that right now. So that's kind of where we're at with that, but we thought it was important to kind of give you guys an update and let you know where we're at.
Any questions about those items? I have one. Eric, any word on the benches down at the basketball court?
Yeah, one is in. We got one on one side, and to be honest, we looked at where we're at. We thought we can fit 2 benches in, but with ADA, we're only able to get one in. So we're going to look at those boxwoods on the other side, and probably they're dying, to be honest. So we'll move those and put another one on the other side. So we do have the bench in right now, and the other one should be coming up soon.
Okay. Any other questions for Eric?
Have a couple more. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I just kept going. Broughton Park, during the Ways and Means, during the Citizen Budget Forum, someone brought up an idea about the steering wheel, and they said they couldn't remember what I had told her, and the simple answer was the manufacturer doesn't make a steering wheel anymore. So that's why it hasn't been replaced. We've been looking at other manufacturers. They're not great. Most of the steering wheels out there are cheap plastic, to be completely honest. They're Home Depot type, playground quality. And so we're looking at other things, but we're trying our best because, again, a kid asks for something that takes a lot of, we like it when kids ask specifically for things, so we try to help them out. And then Brentwood Days. I don't know if you've heard about Brentwood Days. A couple things. We were very excited and very happy with some things we did. We talked about how to make that event better. We've talked about that in the past and how to get more people down there. We did that. We did very successful, our communication effort. We had 675 shares of our one specific social media post, close to 800 when you count all the Brentwood Days things. And getting places like Fun for STL Kids and St. Louis Moms Group and those type of things that we want to be seeing our media push. And Sean has been building those relationships since he started, and we're seeing a broader reach of our social media, which is wonderful. We also talked about compressing the event, and we said on Saturday, there's that lull from 1 to 3. We pushed it back, and I will tell you, there was not a dull moment in that park. I will tell you, we had a line 50 long for about 20 minutes for our tent. We're just an informational tent, but we had a line for the informational tent. It was actually kind of fun. I did not get to work on the budget, which is sad. I always like working on budget during Brentwood Days, but but it is what it is. So that did lead to some long lines. And I'll be honest, I've been here 10 years. We've had this event 8 of those 10 years, 7 of the 10 years. COVID, I can't remember exactly. I've heard about long lines every one of those years. Every time we have an event with free carnival rides, people will show up and people will want to be on those rides. What do? There's options. We have our wrap-up meeting next Wednesday with the staff, police, fire, all the internal staff, and we'll be making recommendations to the Public Works Committee in October. So, or just discussion, maybe not recommendations, but bringing different options that we could think about. So probably nothing new. We've probably talked about it before, but it might be time to revisit those items.
Yeah, Jeff?
So the outreach you did, that was unique to this year? You did more outreach to certain
No, I mean,
outlets?
we do what we normally do. I think what's happened in the past year, and part of it is Brentwood Park, right? I mean, part of it is people are starting to recognize what we're doing in Brentwood. I've talked about our programming before. Our program revenue has increased 1,000%. We're doing some nice programming that people are recognizing. Our marketing person has done a nice job getting our information out that people are starting to notice. Like I said, these groups are starting to kind of tag us on a lot of things. We tag them, they tag us. So I think over the past year, we've seen this growth of our reach in social media. We talk about it a lot in our weekly reports, how many people we're bringing in, our outreach and things like that. And I think this is a culmination of a lot of those things together. It's a great problem to have. We have programs, we have new programs, exciting programs. I keep talking about, maybe because I like to drink, but the Wine and Whiskey Walk. We already have 150 people signed up for that event in November. We're partnering with Clayton, and we are outpacing Clayton registration. We don't typically do that when we partner with Clayton, but we are starting to see a broader reach of what we do based on everything we've been doing over the past, I mean, I'd like to say the past 10 years since I've been here, but really it's been a culmination with Brentwood Park and Sean. Sean takes a lot of credit for this.
Yeah, and I think that that's good that you're going to have a regroup, and I'd say everything's on the table as far as ideas, even if you thought maybe it wouldn't work in the past. Obviously, dynamics have changed. Expectations are that, you know, they are what they are. There's different, depending on what party you're in, right? There's, if you're a vendor, food vendor, you love all the activity and you've sold out all your food and it's been a successful event, right? But if you're a parent with kids and they want to ride some rides and they, you know,
Yeah.
it starts to, you know, have a little bit of a challenge. So I think we have to put all the ideas on the table and then have a discussion about it. And
It is definitely a balance, and maybe we tipped the scale to past what we want it to be. I will tell you, the Brentwood Boosters put out on Facebook that they have funded their entire 2024 scholarship program with Brentwood Days.
I know, that's
That's an
exciting.
amazing stat to say.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
absolutely.
so those are the things that we kind of have to balance when we talk about a lot of this stuff.
All right, any other questions for Eric? All right, thanks, Eric. All right, we'll go into planning and development. We need, okay, we're gonna come back to that in new business or old business. Okay, we'll go into 8A, old business, into the stormwater stuff.
Your packet is the revised Exhibit A letter. I sent that earlier.
Stormwater, it's a different
Oh,
water
excuse me.
issue.
Oh,
We've got multiple water issues.
So this was referred back from the planning to look at possibly revising the square footage necessary for Gonzalez, several case studies, scenarios, various option. That would be another task order, approximately $6,800. We think we can get it lowered, but I know I needed some direction on what type of scenarios you would like him to run. That would include like several deep dives or switching it to a percentage versus square footage, that kind of thing. Direction on that, and we would bring it back to you for that.
Yeah, I think Steve wanted to have some comments on this as well. Yeah. All right, Jeff?
Yeah, I hesitate to, one, I think we had provided at this committee, I know we provided direction that we would like to see for the open house, a breakdown of cost by some sort of what-if scenarios, and that didn't materialize.
Well, I mean, and that was part of the discussion, in that the costs are roughly the same, based upon whether it's under, the only real difference in the engineering, there's not a lot of difference in the engineering. The only real difference is in the permit fees of 500 if you're under 500 square foot, or over 500, it's $1,000.
Yeah, so I think that the concerns that I have for it are, and I listened back when I think I listened back to several of the meetings online that took this up originally. Some of you were on the committee at the time, probably recall. The same concerns were expressed at those meetings that were expressed, I think, earlier this summer when we had our meeting, that, you know, we got to be careful to where we don't start making it so onerous and for somebody to improve their home. And I feel like we've kind of overcorrected where the problem is these infill homes that are on smaller lots that fill a significant portion of the lot itself and then raise the elevation and push the water around. I get that needs to be addressed. The other issue we had that I think most hear about is, you know, downspouts and sump pumps being piped into areas that probably aren't good. So those parts of this ordinance, I think, are important to retain and to continue to evaluate. Where I get concerned is I'd like to have some water runoff implication data to determine, what does contribute to the problem. If someone is, because I know, there's been a lot of talk about, well, if somebody puts a little bit over 200 square foot, patio or front porch, the total cost of that project may be under $10,000, total, and then now you're going to add on a huge amount of BMP engineering that seems to be a specialized engineering firm. Structural engineers don't even cost this much, and then we're going to have permits to have a specialized consultant. I mean, a $500 permit fee and a $1,000 permit fee for them to not draw the plans, but to actually just look at the plans seems excessive for smaller projects. So I just, that's why I don't know that we fully vetted out the triggers that trigger when this type of engineering should be required, and because I haven't seen anything based on facts that say, yes, these things contribute to the problem. That's why I'd like to have a discussion more about this, and again, I did a lot of research, and even if you just in Google infill stormwater permit, I mean, Brentwood's about the only one that pops up in the country, when it comes up with stuff. So I feel like, why are we adding so many layers, and it seems like some of the other municipalities just aren't doing this, so I'm curious about that.
Okay, so when we did this the last time, we were not leading the pack by any stretch of the imagination. Many other, I know Clayton does it, Kirkwood, there's a whole list, so I know back in that old stuff. And so, must not have as much infill or additions in your
Probably don't.
ward, because I hear about water runoff all the time. It's probably the biggest thing I hear about by far. So I think there's got to be some middle ground, because we can't, it's ridiculous that somebody who wants to put a patio in that's 300 square feet has to then go spend an extra
$3,000.
well, they have to do the study, and then they have to do the permits, and I know it's the same impervious space land, and it's still going to run off on the neighbor, but that's too onerous. But we've got to do something, because you put on an addition, or you rerun your downspouts, and it runs in the next door neighbor, and then they have low windows, and it goes in their basement, and then they call us, they call me, I talk to the city. And you'll get it too as soon as, you'll it's coming. So I know the last time we solved this, we put in the language about going to the ARB, because if somebody goes to the ARB, they've already hired an architect. It's some sort of larger addition or some sort of larger project on their home. It doesn't make it doesn't really make sense, because impervious material is still impervious whether it goes through an ARB review or not. But at least they've already hired an architect. They've hired people. It's likely a bigger project, so the impact, while still the same cost, it's less of a percentage of the entire thing. So I don't know if it makes sense to go back to that, but there's got to be some sort of middle ground, because this is a problem as bigger houses and bigger additions are going onto our lots.
Yeah, I guess the other issue that I have is listing in the ordinance that, Gonzalez, we've hired Gonzalez to help us come up with, maybe some solutions. They're listed in the ordinance that's who's going to be reviewing, and they're getting a pretty hefty penny for reviewing these documents. Again, not even drafting them. I don't know that we should be putting actual consultants. Honestly, it'd be, if this is such a major issue, then we should probably have people on staff that can look at these, and so we're not expending outside consultant fees. I agree with you on those type of situations, and I do think there should be some middle ground. It just feels, it feels like the 200 square foot thing was just, feels like it starts to get into a big question about, okay, if somebody wants to, and we even heard it in the P and Z when they were talking about it, one of the members of the ARB said, well, I mean, if somebody's smart and they had an addition and a patio they were going to put on that would put them over, the addition doesn't, they'll put the addition on one year and then the next year they'll put the patio in, right? So I don't want to get into this like gaming the system type of attitude where, people are not wanting to spend the extra, costs of this to avoid getting hit. People should be doing what's right for the project. So,
I mean, I agree with both of you. I mean, it's, the onerous is the concern, but I hear this all the time too, maybe because all our lot sizes are 1/16 of an acre, and so you put anything and it rolls downhill into your neighbor's backyard. I mean, I was very comfortable with what we did with the first iteration, Stormwater 1.0, with the ARB, because, and my thought was, if it was a patio and water could go through it, even, just the mortar in between, if that was just sand instead of something that was impervious, and that didn't count as impervious surface. I always interpreted that, so that wouldn't trigger that. But I have heard horror stories too of somebody wants to put a new patio in and it's $8,000 of engineering necessary to do the BMP.
to do a $5,000 or $6,000 construction cost for a patio.
Right. Right. But I don't see how, forget about the money that Gonzalez is asking about, I don't see how scientifically they can answer this question to a degree that is gonna cover all the permutations and the variables and
Maybe it's not, but I just felt like maybe there was a 200 square foot, or let's say 300 square foot on a backyard that is only 1,000 square feet. Yeah, I get it, right? You're a significant percentage, you're covering it up. Right. That water's going somewhere. If you've got a half acre, or a third of an acre lot, and you put a 300 square foot patio, percentage-wise, that's not going to contribute to runoff onto your neighbor's property. So it seemed to me that, and that would be something that engineers, I would guess, would want to look at, like, what's the better way to do it to where it actually, it's not just,
square footage.
doesn't matter a square foot, right? But it's a percentage of your disturbed land and coverage versus square footage. That seems to be more equitable to somebody, and addressing potentially the problem that you have on some of these smaller lots.
Well, I potentially agree with that. If you put the patio next to
No, I agree, I
someone's
agree.
basement window, it's gonna go in.
100%.
There's not a big enough berm between some houses.
No,
that-
I would agree with that.
So I don't know what the solution is, but it's an issue, and P&Z spent a lot of time, and Gonzalez spent a lot of time, and I think we need to figure out how to solve this and not just go back to 1.0 and take the pieces out of here that make sense. 1.0 was a huge forward step, but maybe we only get to 1.5 instead of 2.0, but we need to get somewhere.
Ready, Steve?
Lockmiller or Alderman. I kind of agree. I'm stuck in the middle of trying to figure out what the best way to go on this. I think when we first started, we were kind of looking at the big problem being downspouts and sump pump runoff onto our sidewalks and freezing. We had infill housing where someone's tearing down a little two-bedroom house and filling up the lot with roof and concrete. So I think with that section 500.1770, we solved the downspout problem and sump pumps by placing those in the right area. I think anybody puts anything under roof that's 200 square feet, it's going to have a downspout. They have to pump it into a certain area of their yard. So I just don't see that needing to go through some type of huge amount of expense in design to do that. Then on the other hand, we kind of trap everybody that wants to make an improvement in their home and stay in Brentwood by adding on at a huge expense in design costs. Nancy's saying in her area, but like in Jeff and I area, we've got deep lots. So I don't see why my water will be able to be absorbed in the soil that's in my yard. I think somehow it needs to be tied to whatever soil, some type of ratio of soil disturbance to lot size. So that if you've got, well, I'll take my house, 50 feet wide, 225 foot depth in lot, I can just pump water back to my backyard and it's gonna get absorbed in the soil. I don't see, why we have to go to such an expense just to do something like that in planning. I think that instead of, we need to get away from the square footage idea and go to some type of soil disturbance ratio depending on the size of the lot. My thought on it.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, Nancy.
I'll add, if we do that, if we went to something like that, if somebody's going to build an entire new house, I think if it's a tear down or a significant
no
addition,
question.
there's no question we have to do
Yeah,
this.
no
I mean,
question.
I don't want to go backwards and not do this for the homes that, because even when we have this, the neighbors are having issues. So, email Whitney quite often, so certainly don't want to go backwards.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no question that like larger construction projects, like a whole home demolishing and a new home being put up, that extends significantly beyond what the original footprint of that home is, I get it. It's just these, as Steve said, I think better probably than I did, these folks who maybe bought a home and then have a nice backyard and want to do something with it, and then they feel like, man, now I've got all these extra expenses, means pretty significant expenses, and construction that needs to be done, or do I, start looking somewhere else so I can actually enjoy my backyard or enjoy just an improvement that I'd like to make for my family. That's where I think it starts to get into a little bit of an issue. So I think there's a middle ground there that we should find, and how do we get to that?
So how do we get to that? I mean, so there's a proposal to have Gonzalez spend $7,100 or $68 or whatever, but I'm not sure what scenarios we're asking him to run. I mean, if we switch to a percentage or something like that instead of a
Yeah,
raw number.
that can't cost $7,000 for them to say, okay, well, if you did it based on a percentage, versus a fixed square footage, that I'd like to know what it costs them to give us that data. And then, the other part of it is just making sure that the fees are appropriate. $500 and $1,000 for fees just to have them look at it. Is that consistent with other municipalities?
Have
I
a
couldn't.
contract.
I couldn't find it.
We have a contract with their rate. Their fee rate is in the contract. I don't think we can go back and,
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of what Gonzalez is charging. It's just, is that what we're asking our residents to do? Whether it's Gonzalez or somebody else.
Right.
It seems like we're tied up with fees and and square footage. Because there's a lot of other really good stuff in here. Right now,
100%.
there's they're BMPs, and somebody can have something in the ground, and the city can't go inspect it, and people could let it back up, and
I
it trans.
think
there's
those are-
so much.
those
There's
are
a
all great.
lot of great stuff
100%.
in this ordinance. So I think really what we need to solve is the fees and the size, and that
what triggers.
What
it.
triggers? And I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think we might agree with most everything else but that.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot of things on here that are in their recommendation that are much needed.
Yeah, downspouts and where they go
100%.
and how far
Yeah,
from the
not-
street. Like it's
no
all- yeah.
issues there, and you know, and some of the things that we pushed back on, they've had good answers for, and you know, because I had some concerns about the depths that they needed, and but seems like those are addressed. You're right. It's the fees and the way that it's triggered, whether it's square footage or a percentage of, or those are my biggest issues.
Okay, so how do we find a solution?
Might be
Solution-oriented.
similar to the sewer lateral program. I think this committee took that on too, where we were reimbursing everything until we ran out of money. So, does the city want to subsidize a percentage of this? Or do we, because we also have a list for the sewer lateral of contractors, plumbers that the city recommends. You don't have to pick them. We could go out and get quotes so that you have a better idea, if they haven't done that yet, of what that true cost would be. But given everything going on in the world, cost of everything is going up. So we say it's X today. It could be something
No, I
times
understand.
2
I
tomorrow.
mean, it just becomes a layering effect. Again,
Right.
if the trigger is so small that if I want to put a small addition and extend a front porch or something, say, and I'm on a fairly sizable lot, and now all of a sudden a, $12,000 project turns into, something that costs me $3,000 to have engineering drawings done, analysis and engineering, $500 or $1,000 in permit fees, all of a sudden, and whatever the BMP that's recommended, then it might be another $3,000 for construction. Now all of a sudden, a $12,000 to $15,000 project has turned into a pretty significant overage cost, which, for normal people that live in Brentwood, they may say, well, I guess I can't afford to do that. And then but they're still gonna want it. So then they're gonna start saying, well, maybe it's time for us to look in a different place to live, because they'll accommodate more of what I'd like to have in my lifestyle. So I just don't want people to start feeling like, Brentwood's created such a layering effect of costs and fees because of something, like this, that, it's not feasible to do smaller projects. Bigger projects, I understand, but not everybody, people that are living here would like to maybe improve and stay here,
But on the flip side, somebody does something like that, and then they're flooding out all their neighbors.
Well,
That's a problem.
I mean, but there's got to be a way to have, to recognize that in the plans, again, location of where they're putting it, and,
But then does the staff, what authority does the staff have to not approve that? I mean, if it's not in here, the staff can't just say, oh, it kind of looks like you're gonna flood your neighbor's basement, but you can't do anything about it because your porch is right next to the way the house is set, it looks like it's gonna go right in their basement, but, they we'd hear about that too.
yeah, well.
Okay, so how do we have a proposal from Gonzalez to do something.
Yeah, but
to-
I
to
think
come
most
up
of
with a
their,
better
most of their
answer on the-
cost was
on
to
the threshold.
come up with lots of different, different scenarios of projects, which we kind of asked them to do and they didn't. So I'm a little aggravated at them coming back and say, well, it's gonna cost you now $7,000 to do that.
Right?
So, I mean, but if we were to go back to them and say, okay, what would it cost you to just rerun the, or rewrite this based on a percentage of lot size versus a defined square footage? I'd like to, that would be something I'd be interested to know. What would that cost to rewrite the ordinance to feature that?
So let's talk it. Let's talk about Steve's house. Like it's what, 200 feet deep? Is that what you said? 220. But it's not like, but aren't all the houses sort of next to one another and you just have a really deep thing? So like he could put a huge thing on the back of his house, and if it was a percentage of land disturbance, it might not come up, but because the houses are next to one another, he could have significant runoff because Steve doesn't really care, and he's like, oh, I don't care, I'm just gonna put my sump out 4 feet, and it's gonna go next door, and the city won't catch it, and I'm not gonna pump it way in the back. So I'm not sure about.
Well, again, sump pumps and downspouts, I think,
Yeah, please, anytime.
But then that's where that one section,
right.
you know, you're pumping
And yeah, back.
A new house that's been built, and the neighbor's still concerned that just because the house itself is larger, and that obviously that would, we don't do anything to get rid of that. I mean, what about this ARB language we started with the last time, which is how we solved it?
Same issue, really.
It's the same, we kind of had this issue the last time, and that was the way we got out of it, because you had to go to ARB, you had to have hired an architect, and you were doing more to your house. Is that a solution?
And
Well, I will say, we've gotten an increased number of pools, and that would not require ARB, but that does require a lot of engineering.
right, so I don't think that's,
They
I
have
don't think that's
runoff,
a,
but that, because it doesn't require ARB, it doesn't require the stormwater.
right, I think that's an issue. I mean,
Yeah.
if somebody's filling their, again, a percentage of their backyard, if they're filling it with a big pool, yeah, that's gonna cause runoff problem. And if it's not going to ARB, then, so I don't know if that solves it.
Yeah.
Um,
Trying to pick up stuff that's still an issue.
Just to clarify on behalf of Gonzalez, because I did ask them, we wanted scenarios of how much a project would cost. And so he had a couple, but the projects doesn't really change the cost all that much, so that's why I only had those couple of examples, because he found that the costs were pretty consistent. The cost estimates that were provided. Not that he didn't, but the costs were all kind of the same, so. But what they're proposing here would just be run through a bunch of scenarios and calculations to justify a cost-benefit analysis to determine what is the best square footage in which something would need to trigger. The thought was that they would just be doing really hard calculations and multiple scenarios so that the city would have some sort of legal backup, which is
Yeah, I
which
mean,
is why it would cost that much, but we can certainly talk to them about lowering it, based upon if you want to see about ratio, that kind of thing.
well, I mean, in their recommendation, so some of the other cities have this as 1,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet, and then in their recommendation, they were even saying that you might want to look at pushing that up to 500 square feet. But there was no rationale for why. It was just like, well, it's pretty onerous, 200 square feet. So our consultant even said that, but this board, and the P&Z didn't really take that up that much. So that's why I wanted to take it up and just kind of make sure that we're doing the right thing, not having some of these details that kind of trip people up. I'm having a hard time getting my head around it with it. It just doesn't seem like it's the right metrics. So I'm not sure what, so let me see, where's their proposal? Have the proposal in here? Or is it just,
I just
is it
got it,
itemized, you
yeah.
just got a cost?
Yeah.
Like, I don't, what's covered in that cost? I'm not saying I'm interested in spending
So that's what
another.
I could come back with, is get more
Yeah, I'd like to have a
cost
breakdown.
estimate, see how we can lower it.
Well, I'm just talking about in their estimate of $7,100.
Oh, well, that
What-
was for this. The 68 is revised estimate to do. That include research, project management, and client plotting results of cost-benefit analysis.
That gonna get us to a solution?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think if that was gonna get us to a solution, then I would recommend spending the money, but it
I don't
doesn't
think
sound,
it
I
is.
don't
More
think that's,
analysis and it's not gonna help.
right,
I
yeah, I
mean,
don't think that's
My
gonna,
opinion.
yeah.
You know, we've got to find this like perfect point where it's not too onerous, but protects the neighbors. You know, and honestly, a lot of these situations, probably if you did nothing, they would be okay, right? I mean, that's the thing, because, you know, whether it's a big lot and, you know, somebody is a you know, responsible person and they're gonna push it into the yard in the right place, and it doesn't matter, right? We didn't need to do this, but it's the problem when they don't do it. That's what happens, and I hear those too. I mean, somebody put a big patio in my, I don't know. I don't know how we find an answer.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I was wondering if did we have in the ordinance where it could be at the planning, the director's discretion or even the building inspector's discretion, that whether or not it would, you know,
Stressful enough.
what's that?
It's
Because then
stressful.
everybody's
The
like, well,
job
you
is
didn't make him
stressful
do
enough.
one, why should I
Yeah.
have to do one?
Yeah.
We'd hear it too.
Yeah. Well, I agree that I don't
Arbitrary,
think that,
yeah.
you know, 10 different cost-benefit analysis scenarios, that's not going to get us to the answer that we're looking for. I think what, you know, I'd just like to have a better sense for, you know, why is it based on square footage and not a percentage of the lot? And then, you know, why is his recommendation 500? Is it just picked out? I feel like we're being given these numbers, and they seem like they're just made up. Like, you know, why did he come in and recommend 500
500 for what?
square feet? So he had said, maybe you change it from 200 to 500. Okay,
I
well,
mean,
why was that?
That was just something, he didn't recommend that. That is the comments that we've gotten that was discussed be discussed at the Planning and Zoning Commission, that if someone, hey, I just want to add a garage to my house, and suddenly it's $6,000 to $11,000 in addition to the cost of the garage. So is 200 too low?
Right, and so then his analysis and his recommendation presentation that he had, he suggested that maybe you increase it to 500.
Well, no, I didn't think he suggested, that's what we were asking,
least
is did P&Z want to take that into consideration? A single-car garage, well, normally, nobody builds a single car. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, a
They don't have-
single-car garage is approximately 336 square feet, and a double-car garage is approximately over 500 square feet, 576. So, yeah, that was the number of, the complaints we've gotten is, I just want to add a garage, and suddenly it added $10,000 to the project.
and my concern too is that you go through this process and you've got to hire an engineer to evaluate it, and they say, hey, you know what, you don't have to do anything. Now I've spent an ungodly amount of money to find out I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, and that was my point about, a lot of these times are probably not necessary, right? I mean, we're not gonna find a perfect answer that covers all these things. We have to, our objective here is to protect the neighbors who have done nothing, right? They're just existing and they're getting flooded all of a sudden, and just try and stop that from happening. Yeah, Nancy?
So I do usually ask this. I don't think I've asked this about this yet. I think the last time we went through this, we had a list of the other municipalities and what the triggers were. Do we have that, or does Gonzalez have that easily handy? Or do we know what other? Okay. Or is that?
I think that when the city initially hired Horner Schifrin was when they came up with that list. We can look through our files
Okay, it's
to
probably
see if
in
it's there.
Board
Yeah,
Docs
it's
somewhere.
in Board Docs somewhere.
I mean, it
We can
would
look
be
for that.
dated as ours
Right.
is, but
We can look for that, and if it doesn't exist, we can send out a survey and try to get some feedback.
with all the staff and planning and development.
I'll take that on.
All right, so
That would be helpful. to
going
see.
back to the two issues we have, right? So we've got the fees thing. I feel that's separable from the threshold in some respect,
Yeah,
right?
sure,
So,
sure.
and that's probably a little more straightforward. That's us throwing out a number, probably more than anything. But what I would recommend is, this is a difficult issue. We all know that, right? It's there's probably no exact right answer. I would say, my recommendation is we table this to the next meeting. Maybe ask for a recommendation on what a percentage would look like. So we're talking, maybe we can evaluate that, and that would, give us a chance to think about the problems we've had, the issues we've seen, and what would that percentage look like in that situation, right? To kind of bounce that off. It's not a, cost-benefit analysis, but just kind of understand what this list looks like. And then we'll keep talking about it. This is tough,
It's a
right?
tough- it's a very
And
difficult-
however long it takes, and that's how long it takes.
Yep.
There's no
Agree.
urgency on this.
Yeah, there isn't.
That sound okay?
Yep,
So Whitney,
sounds good.
so can we get a suggestion next month of a percentage?
Come up with something.
That's right, make it
And
20.
I would be curious what other,
Yeah,
just to kind of see what other municipalities do, so make sure we're not just recommendation isn't just way out of whack compared to what others are doing.
Okay. Whew. This is great. All right, well, enough about stormwater and sewage stuff. Let's move into 8B, stormwater and sewage stuff.
Very little talking on my part. In your packet is the amended Exhibit A. And we have had some feedback from members of the board. And so this is considerably different from what was adopted by the board at the September 5th meeting. So I wonder if you've had an opportunity to review it. Are there additional edits to be made? I sent it to MSD this afternoon, so we don't have their response yet. I didn't expect it. Prematurely, I had thought that we'd be at a place where we could bring it back to the board, which is why they were here on Monday. So we're going to push this till October, provided there's consensus on what it says now.
Yeah, Nancy?
Oh, thank you for making I know there were other changes, which is why I was asking you. I'm like, this isn't the latest one. I was confused. And thank you for adding the couple that I had. And then one of the issues I was concerned about was the side of the street on White Avenue and the school. And it's not, I had reached out separately to MSD after that meeting, the public meeting. And so I kind of know which side of the street most of the ones in Ward 1 are going to be. And so the issue that I had been concerned about with the school is not a concern. The school didn't have the issue, but I was.
Okay.
But so.
Good.
But yeah. So I think it looks good.
Okay, so is that a motion to accept this and
Yes, I
take it to the board?
would like to make a motion that we approve this letter and send it to the full Board of Aldermen for approval, and then for them to send it on to MSD.
Perfect. Thank you.
Second?
All right. Any other comments, questions?
I did have one question. In the letter, when it talks about, at the very end on page 2, the sort of option 1, option 2, explain that to me?
We need their feedback, MSD.
Okay, so that's-
I don't think they're going to agree to both.
Right,
So we need to hear back from them, and whatever is decided, you'll see reflected in the final
that'll be in the
document.
final. Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great. Okay, we'll move into item 8C. I asked this to be put on as a bit of a recurring, so if you may remember, and Sullivan, you're new, so welcome to another long Durham thing. I mean, as everybody knows, I believe we have 3 openings in our inspector corps right now. I've noticed an uptick in calls from businesses and residents about time of inspections and times of permit review. I've also hearing from the school, because the Brentwood is doing inspections on Mark Twain's renovations. We typically have not done that historically for McGrath, the high school, the middle school. That is putting an extra load onto our inspectors. You may remember at the last Alderman meeting, we approved a contract with IMTS to get some additional work on there. And I just think we need to keep an eye on this and see how we're doing. I am concerned that we're spending a lot of money to have our own inspectors. And the intent of that, based on talking to people, is that we want to be more responsive. And if we're not being more responsive, then we got to do something else. A couple years ago, I brought up the idea of putting commercial inspection onto the county. I still think that is something we should potentially vet going forward. And I'm looking to make sure that we are managing this, that we are being responsive, and we are giving our team what they need, if they need to go hire somebody else, if they need to do something differently, to make sure we're doing that.
So we have gotten the numbers of permits down. We have gotten the number of permits down. Currently, we are at approximately 12. Most of them were submitted early as September 12th. One was submitted earlier than that, but we've sent that off to IBTS, because it's a larger building commercial addition for the American Animal Protective Services at 1705 South Hanley, so IBTS is reviewing that for us. John Bennis has been doing a lot of inspections along with Scott. You will see this as part of the budget. But from January 1 to September 15th, we've done 4,661 inspections. That is a record for us. Permits are being scheduled a week out. However, we have talked to people, like we do with the Mark Twain School, that if they call, it's like, hey, I can't get my inspection. I failed an inspection, but I can't get a new one until next week. Can he come by sooner? We always try to have him fit in when we can, just as long. We just tell people they just need to get it on the schedule so that we can mark it off and track it easier. Scott does go out to Mark Twain between 8 and 9 and noon to 1 when no one else can book in his time, so that he can do all of the inspections while he's there. John Bennis has also gone by and said, okay, I can fill in later in the day that way. We had a meeting with them earlier this week, and they said they thought that was working well, so we're doing what we can.
So on the IMTS, so they're doing permit review. Is that John Bennis that's doing the permit review, or is there a larger population that we're able to pull on?
It's ITBS.
Sorry, I spelled that wrong.
John does some of them, the smaller ones. If there's a larger one, he sends it off to his Kansas City office for them to review, so that he can just focus on inspections. So.
Are there other resources we should be bringing online? I know we've talked about PGAV and Gonzalez as.
PGAV did not have anyone available that would be able to provide permit review services. Gonzalez does still has done some permit review. So we still have that available, and they may have someone available that can help us pick up on inspections as well. So I'm trying to get that going too.
Yeah, Nancy?
So, I mean, we've lost a lot of staff. There's been an open position for at least this full year, and was it the previous year too? Or just this year we funded it. So I guess my question is, and I know people are just hopping from municipality to municipality, and so this is one of those things that's like, ugh, we've got all these municipalities, and this is a bad piece of it. There aren't many, but this is one. This is one. So is our pay scale right? Do we need to really look at the pay that we're giving these people? Because when they hop from Brentwood to go somewhere else, like, that's not good for us, and it's not good for our citizens. So do we need to be paying people more? Is it better to, since we've had this position open the whole time, do we need to have fewer positions and pay them more so that they're willing to stay and do the work? Is there a different skill set to change some of the responsibilities? I don't know if it's like somebody does permit review and somebody does inspections. I mean, I
Really,
don't know
yeah.
enough about this, but it just seems like
We've
this
looked
is
at all of
broken.
that, and that's part of the compensation study, to look at the job description, and not just the title, and then to do a true comparison of what the comparators are doing. So we have done that, and the last time we did the compensation study, and we thought they were rightly placed. But, in the interim, other cities have, because we're all on different calendar schedules, have now done theirs. So then it is an opportunity to revisit that fully across the board for next year. But in positions where the challenges exist the most, we engage the compensation consultant to, do a snapshot for just these positions. I was going to bring to the board in this past Monday, maybe a request for reclassification, because in talking to other cities, neighboring cities, what they're doing, and then in talking to staff, it was communicated to me that that's a bad idea. What I was looking to do, reclassification to a plan review, because a plan review would be job specific, and then when you catch up, that person doesn't have the depth to do anything but plan review, so then how do we fill their time?
And
But certainly, I think it's an opportunity to revisit that, because we are losing people for more pay, certainly, and promotions as well. So the last position that we lost was a significant promotion, in that person took on a department level director position. So it's different. But we are revisiting that, and right now, I'm engaging somebody to see whether there might be interest in coming on board to the city. So I hope to bring that forward to the city once this person and I have had a chance to talk.
We've also talked, so we have 12 permits in review, latest from 9/12. I mean, that's good data. I mean, Whitney, do you know how many inspections we have pending?
they're being booked a week out. But no, so then we just tell people, like, go ahead and get it on the schedule, but call us and we can see about fitting you in. But there's no way of, they have to schedule it because that tells us when they're ready for it to be inspected. So
Right.
there's no way to know how many are pending.
I know when we started talking about this in 2021, our goal was, next day inspections.
Yeah. Well, we got all of the permit reviews from when we lost staff up to speed. So now, obviously, now it's the inspections that we're trying to catch back up onto as well. So normally, it would have been, call us, we can turn it around in a day or two. Yeah.
Can you give us how's MyGov doing? I know that there was some changes with it or updates and it's supposed to make things more streamlined. I still kind of hear people have issues with MyGov in that So, you know, can you give us a sense of where that stands?
I would say some things that it improved upon, some things I think still need improvement. But it's like any online permitting system. People just want to be able to go call in and go, can you do this for me?
Well, it seems like I mean, it seems like it gets to the point where they can't really make the system do what they need to do, so they just
Well,
resort to calling in and,
Yeah, well, and Jessica can probably answer this better than I can, because she speaks to every one of those phone calls. She does walk them through, and then generally once they go, oh, well, this is easy, I can now schedule all my other permits inspections whenever. So once they've gotten it, they get it. And Jessica has been wonderful in walking them through. We've created step-by-step guides of what to do, so that helps a lot. But it's learning a
Might
new system
ask
for everybody.
Jessica, since she stayed late to attend this meeting, if she can speak to it, if
Sure,
you would
yeah.
recognize her.
Hi, Jessica Study, permit clerk. I get a lot of calls, about 1,000 a month, sometimes more. And a lot of those calls are first-time callers, first-time permit holders, and so I walk them through the process. Most people are willing to learn, and they are very grateful that I've taken the time to walk them through the process. The rest of the calls are people who have had the opportunity to use the system and go through it, and those people are generally a little resistant. No matter how many times I've gone through it with them. They just want somebody to do it for them.
So Jessica, those 1,000 calls, I mean, is that your job? I mean, I don't know how to say that better, but, you know, I mean, like, is your job description that if somebody calls, you put it in for them, or are you training them on MyGov on how they can do it in the future?
Well, since we've migrated, I am working through with each person who needs help going through it. Of course, not all those calls are about MyGov. It's about, you know, planning and zoning, architectural review board, you know, everything across the spectrum. What do I do for a fence? Oh, I want to do, you know, I want to put in a new front door. Do I need a permit for that? So not every call is about MyGov, but maybe half of them are. But a lot of, you know, we do occupancy permits, so we've got, you know, the real estate agents, property managers, all these different people calling in. I'm selling my home. How do I work through this process? Does my realtor do it for me? Do I do it? Who does it? You know, so I'm walking them through that. And then if the realtor follows up, then I'm walking them through that process as well. And then you've got the new tenants coming in as well. So they're like, do I need to pull a permit? No, you don't need a permit. It's already been pulled by the real estate agent or the homeowner. You just need to come in at this point and complete the paperwork.
I will say, Brandon Weggie, Alderman Weggie, apologize, had asked about maybe hiring a part-time person to assist with all of the MyGov. So that is part of our budget request, so that will be part of the review.
Yeah, I mean, my thought on that is, you know, I'm an engineer, and sometimes you have people doing kind of the wrong work, right? And that's not an efficient use of them. Do we need a data entry person that is just well-versed in MyGov and that could take some of the load off of other people, and that's more specialized, or I guess more specialized to that, but less specialized in inspections and permitting and things like that? So are we maximizing utility of people's skills, basically?
So my background, I was essentially a permit clerk at the city of Creve Coeur as well, and I paid attention to what my inspectors were doing. So part of my job, even though it's probably not technically in my job description, is to kind of field some of these phone calls from the inspectors and the plan reviewers to take the load off of them. So are you going to get that from another person? Maybe, if they have a similar background. But it's not a guarantee. Most people don't have any experience. They're just kind of shuffling papers.
Yeah, Jeff?
Jessica, of those 1,000 calls you get, or maybe a little less that are related to MyGov, do you feel like you're basically having the same conversation over and over?
Sometimes.
I mean,
not
or
always.
is it is it a similar, but is it a similar, like, similar conversation?
It's Yeah, and everything is posted on the website. People just don't know that they should be looking at the website. And once I direct people there, I'm like, I want to take the time to go through it with them to make sure that they really get it, so they don't get confused and feel like they need to call back.
I guess what I'm wondering is rather than a staff that kind of has to have the same conversation or same tutorial over and over, I get that it might be posted or listed as a document, but it seems to me in this generation that we're in that maybe a video of tutorial of how to use it,
They're available.
would be, if it were posted in a place that is easily accessible, and if that would be just as effective as you spending time walking them through it, just seems
I
like.
don't know that the
most-
age group of those that we are dealing with
Well,
are those that
true,
tend to be savvy
potentially,
with
potentially.
that.
And
They're
most
not-
peop-
But eventually that changes, right? You're gonna have.
When that changes, we can readjust
Yeah.
the budget, but they're not the demographic that we're dealing with. And that was representative of the meeting we had just
Is that right?
just this week.
And most people want that personal touch. They appreciate having someone go through it with them to make sure that they've done it right. A lot of people, even though they found it on the website, they will then in turn call me and say, I did this, can you confirm that I did it correctly?
Okay.
I'll just like to add that people love Brentwood, and those little touches are really important. And so the fact that somebody on the
Yeah.
website, and it does take your time, but then they're like, oh, I did it right. Oh, Brentwood's great. I did it the right way. Somebody told me. I didn't just have to get frustrated online. So thank you for what you do. And any touch we have with our citizens that's a positive one is good. So.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to the data entry. I mean, other cities have a voicemail, and you leave a voicemail, right? And say, I need an inspection, and then you text them back or whatever, I mean, is that an investment that we should make, to have another person that is working and just managing that? I mean, that kind of flies in the face of why we switched to MyGov in some respects, because it was the push it on to other people and save us time. But is that something we should be doing? And staffing it appropriately, not just expecting other people to do it. Okay, I would also ask, I mean, in the weekly report, the city administrator report, I mean, it'd be good that, I mean, we used to, years ago, get everyone ever, and I don't think it needs to be every week, but just, I'd be interested in, how many permits are waiting for review, some of that data that should be very easy to get out of MyGov, I would think.
I've been providing those monthly reports, but I could try to include those that are waiting in review. I will add, almost every city is moving to an online permitting system. St. Louis County is. You can no longer just call in for an inspection. So this is a trend nationwide that everybody's moving to online permitting.
Yeah. And then I just have one more question, and maybe this is for Bola, but in the finance operations, it says permit inspections generate revenue in excess of $1 million for the city of Brentwood.
So it's a combination of several. It's not just one. Several revenue sources.
Okay,
I can break that down. I don't have my budget book with me, but I can break that.
okay,
break
because
down
that wasn't the number I was
detail.
able to find.
Oh, that was the number?
It was not.
It was not. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So I would just challenge that, just because, and the only reason I point that out is we're talking about how much we're spending versus how much we're making for those conversations. Okay, all right, thanks Whitney and Scott and Jessica, thanks for everything you're doing. Okay, we'll go on the no new business, no mo April.
So the Sustainability Commission has made a recommendation that the city participates in NOMO April. The information is in the memo, but it's basically an idea of if you don't mow, you have some nutrient-rich wildflowers grow that first month for bees and other pollinators. In addition, it saves water, it helps your lawn become more resilient to drought, and reduces pollution by reducing emissions from gas-powered lawnmowers. So if the city would like to do that, what we'd have to do is probably update our ordinances to say that we would not, we would relax our enforcement during the month of April, If this committee is agreeable to that, I can work with Whitney and bring back a update of ordinance at our next Public Works meeting.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with this in a sense. I know we have some issues with keeping, our compliance with, grass or overgrowth and all of that. I know this is early in the growing season. Have we seen any or talked to like Webster? Did they have any negative things coming out of the NOMO where they had people, saying, oh, I kind of like letting it grow a little wild and then all of a sudden when enforcement comes back online after that little relaxed period, now all of a sudden we've got to send out code enforcement people. So that's one of my questions.
I think, while I'm not talking to Webster specifically, when you look at the research from a lot of different municipalities doing nationwide, it's received pretty favorably through the community. So
Okay.
I don't think there's much of an issue. I think if anything, it'll be year one. But I think part of it is, like anything else, is communication.
Retraining.
Yeah, training, and even talking about like possible yard signage that people can get from City Hall that they put on their yards that say that they're participating in NOMO April, things like that. So it becomes almost like a community event.
If the board were to approve this, I would suggest that before the growing season, we publicize the heck out of it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will get calls.
You get complaints and then, then people,
Right.
And that's what I just want to avoid is this, and then creating a condition where people think, oh, I can just kind of relax myself a little bit on my yard work, and now all of a sudden you've got, that is what I get actually most of my calls about, so you might get what, I get most of my calls about weeds and overgrowth and people not taking care of their yard. And so, while this is a sort of a feels good to do, and that probably is a good thing for the, for the bees to get established, all for that. I also don't want to create an issue down the road. I would also add to this, I think, one of the riches that we have as a community is our parkland. And I think as we start to evaluate parkland, I've always advocated for there are areas that we should have nice turf, and then there's areas that I think we should reclaim to have pollinator gardens or something like that. I think that probably goes further in making an impact by creating refuge areas in our parklands that are beautiful and create pollinator things than a few people here and there in the community not mowing their grass in April. So I would just say if this is about a pollinator kind of initiative, then let's think bigger with even city property, and maybe that comes into play with our Parks Master Plan.
We are, as we talked about the master plan, there's going to be a large sustainability aspect of the plan, looking at things like that, not only for, just environmental, but also for maintenance as well. So yeah.
And they can be, if they're done well, they can be beautiful. It's not just wild weeds.
Yes.
Yeah, I would also say, sorry, Nancy, cut in front of you there, but if people wanted to do this, they can do it. So they would get a code enforcement letter that would give them 15 days, and that would get them through the month. And I know people are already starting to do that in some respects. So,
Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? But yeah, Nancy.
I was gonna say, I really like the sign idea. I exercise in Webster 2 mornings a week, and so I noticed this, I think for the first time last year. And I noticed the signs in the yards. I'm like, oh, well, their grass is a little higher, and they have a sign. And so it made you not mad because like, oh, well, it's just this, it's like the mustache in November, but the yard, and and then the signs went away, and at least the couple of streets I drive on, I haven't noticed an issue. Now, I'm not driving all through Webster, but just the notification of it made it look like it was on purpose and not just a messy yard.
Slackers.
Yeah, so I do like the sign.
So do we need a motion to flesh this out?
I mean, ultimately, as long as you're okay with us working on the legislation and bringing it back, I don't know if we need a motion.
Anyone have an issue with that? Okay.
Great. Next up is Memorial Park Pedestrian Bridge project. Couple things with this. As you remember, last year, we tried to replace the 40-foot bridge. It was $117,000 over budget. We had the historic rains in July, so we tried to, and that bridge was underwater, so we did talk to FEMA about it. They're still evaluating everything. I mean, we are finally through step 8 and now on to step 9. All of our projects have been submitted to FEMA, now under review, and the parks are one of them. But I think at best, they're going to maybe replace the decking and give us funding for replacing the decking. They're not going to do the whole bridge, most likely. Now, FEMA funding doesn't have to be especially, A for A. I mean, you just get the funding and you work on everything else. So there's lots of things going on, which is why this is kind of delayed a little bit. We're trying to get the FEMA approval first, but we had to get this out. So we put it out. We put $320,000 in this year for the bigger bridge that goes over Black Creek. We did put both bridges in, hoping that we'd have FEMA funding, and we know that there'll be some cost savings. And so we did advertise over 4 weeks. We did say that, we want specific prices for both bridges, and the city would could do one or both bridges, or would select which bridges they want to do. It wasn't an all or nothing type thing. And so we did receive 9 bids. And honestly, that's a great news that we're starting to see contractors be hungry again. And so you'll see Ranieri brought in a total price for both bridges of $429,000. So we added the bid tabulation. The good part about that is what we did put in the budget was $320,000 for the 70-foot bridge, so we're under budget. And because we're at this point of the year, we'll probably span both fiscal years too. So we're planning to put $200,000 in next year's capital to make sure that, depending on how things flow this year, next year, we also have some testing that the city's responsible for SCI or another type contractor for things like that. So there'll be a little additional. So we're covered if we want to do this. Ranieri has done multiple bridge projects, have worked with a lot of municipalities. We've worked with Bi-State, MoDOT, St. Louis County, State of Missouri. So they're very reputable, and I reached out to Navigate. They've worked with them. We reached out to municipalities. They were satisfied with their work. So our recommendation is to approve the contract with Ranieri for both bridges with an 8% contingency, which would be $34,000. And that way we can get both those done end of this year, early next year, and bridge both fiscal years.
So my first question is, because I know I'm also sent on Ways and Means, and I know what we're dealing with there, do we need to do both bridges?
We're getting close to needing to do both bridges. I mean, the last thing, they're not unsafe, but they're coming to the end of their useful life. Can they, and talking to our park superintendent, can they go another year, another 2 years? Possibly, yes. Do we feel more comfortable if we take care of them now? Yes. That's the simple answer.
So having not seen your capital budget requests, is this the thing that you really want to do with your capital budget next year? Is this top of the list? So the first 100,000, I mean, I guess it's 109,000. So the first 109,000 is you definitely want to spend it on these 2 bridges?
Yes, I'll be honest, it is, just because I'd feel more comfortable if we have 2 solid pedestrian bridges in our parks, and every time there's a high water event or something else, that we're not worried about them.
So when something else doesn't make it in your budget, you're...
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is replacement the only option, or is there, go around and weld it up and get underneath there? And
They're starting to rust through in some areas, and that's where the danger is that especially right where the decking is, we're getting to the point where it's starting to rust, and we can't stop it. It's past its point where we could do anything with it. And if you let it go too long, then you won't have anything to attach the decking to. That's our concern. We're not there. We have a couple years, like I said, but I'd rather take care of something now than worry about an emergency expenditure later.
Because the Black Creek Bridge is probably about 20 years old.
They're both about 25 to 30. I think they're done right around the same time.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to go with Ranieri.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this for a couple of years now. And, you know, a couple of years ago, it was a lot cheaper. I don't know that it's gonna get even cheaper if we wait more. So, I mean, as much as I hate to spend this much money on bridges, on these bridges, but, you know, we do need to have them safe. I'll make the motion that we go with Ranieri Construction for both bridges.
Second.
All right, any other comments? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
All right, so lastly is our other fun topic, which is field number 1. I'll tell you, you know, I think more to be out of spite than anything else. I took Bola on a nice golf cart ride during Brentwood days, and I don't think during the 5-minute golf cart ride there's actually a smooth surface throughout that whole thing. The field is bad. It's in bad shape. It's been in bad shape. Again, this is something that, you know, in working with FEMA, they took basically the part that was most damaged, which is, if you remember walking out there, the right field section of the field. Left field wasn't as bad. It's like, no, we're not going to help you with that. That's just water. It's really where all the stuff came in. So we looked at it, you know, and we also had some nice kids go out and do some wheelies on there, and the police department caught them, and we received some restitution. So there's some additional damage on top of Brentwood Days and everything else. And so what we'd like to do is a 50,000 square foot section, which is what I put on that map. It's basically center field over to the right field fence. I think it gets us the best playing surface we can expect at this time. If we want to do the whole field, it's $116,000. I'm not recommending that. Just because if we're going to have Brentwood Days on there, we're just going to have to deal with the damage that continues to happen. And that's just for field 1. I mean, that doesn't even include field 2 and 3, which also has damage on it from Brentwood Days. So what we would do to help save some money is that we would actually strip the area ourselves. We can do that with our tiller, till it up and get it ready for them to come in to basically level, get all, you know, laser level it. They'll get the low spots evened out, get water grading out to the right spot. So, which will help us with the biggest issue is that when it rains and we have low spots, the puddles in the outfield sit there for days because there's no filtration because we're on very compacted clay. And so this does us the best part of it. We expect somewhere between $12,000 to $15,000 from FEMA, $6,000 from the restitution, which leaves $18,000 for this year, which we do have in savings in our parks capital budget. So our recommendation is to use Schaefer-Meyerstein and sod, which is what we decided to do in the spring. We told them we would come back, or you recommended that we come back based on our recommendation, and have them come out and do the work. The timeline is they can do it in 7 to 10 days. Once we give them the go-ahead, about 5 days, and then we basically should lock down that field and let the sod grow and be ready for baseball. It'll probably be the best surface the high school will see until we decide to do something like this again.
Yeah, Jeff?
So you're suggesting that then basically half of the outfield be sodded, the other half is the way it is? How do you, I mean, do you have concerns with different types of grasses and different levels and now, you know?
If you go out there now, there's some fescue in there. There's not much fescue. So Bermuda that came in during the flood has kind of taken over some of it, and there's a lot of weed. So we basically have 3 different green surfaces on that field. No, ultimately our Schaefer's job will be to kind of make sure it kind of grades into it so it looks.
That's what I was wondering is,
Yep.
is can the staff do something to where we can somehow overseed fescue on the other side so that at least there's a turf that feels uniform?
Yes, and we will. That'll be part of what we do in the winter. We just hired a new field maintenance person who specifically working on field maintenance. He comes from California. His wife, thankfully, got a job at SLU. We benefit from that. He likes, he's taken his high school and college field and has basically renovated them. We're real excited to have him. He showed up at Brentwood Days. I don't think he questioned his first day was Monday, so I don't think he questioned what he did. He did say he's seen worse, so that made me feel a little bit better. But we're real excited to see what he'll do with our fields, and he's excited to jump in and start working on them.
Yeah, and I will say that, yes, the baseball diamond obviously is, the field itself, for the high school is a big concern, always has been. I think I've seen kids out there, twist their ankle going for a ball. So it does become dangerous. I would also say that Field 4 is getting dangerous too, with how many lumps and dips, and there's big craters in front of the goals, and we've got kids running around there all the time. I think if there's anything we can do, even as we're tilling things up, if there's anything that we can do to kind of help fix Field 4 a little bit better too, that would be ideal. But I just want to make sure that we're not trying to cut this down to a smaller section, and then we still have either parts on that field and then other fields that are just as terrible.
If you look, it's hard to tell, but what this does is in center field gets us past the gate. The most amount of damage is the gate where you drive basically all the heavy trucks, all the vehicles, and more importantly, I mean, you guys are in the parade, but after the parade, we just had thousands of people walk that strip, all the way to the carnival rides. I will say this: the tough part about the sports complex has been two things in the 10 years I've been here. It's been the consistent flooding, which continues to compact the fields and everything else, and it's been Brentwood Days. It is frustrating to hear how bad people think those fields are. We hate to hear that. There's not ever going to be a great playing surface down there as long as we have Brentwood Days down there, and that's something I wish I could fix for you guys. I just cannot, and my staff cannot. We can't. We can fix it with $300,000 a year. We can do this for all three fields and Field 4 because we park cars on there. And for about $500,000 a year, I can fix that turf, have it ready until the next Brentwood Days. And that's, if you tell them to have frustrated, it's painful to my staff to get continually bashed by the Brentwood residents for stuff that is not our fault. And we've lost staff. Our last person, who was another field guy who came in, who was excited to work on fields, after what happened in the spring, said, I'm not taking this anymore, and he took off. So we understand the challenges. We work our ass off to get those challenges fixed, and we do the best we can to provide the best field conditions for the community. But until we move Brentwood Days, we're always going to have this issue. Good news is flooding seems to have helped. Brentwood Bound has seemed to have a nice effect on the sports complex as well. So we're not seeing as much water damage as we've had in the past.
I'll make a motion that we approve the bid for fixing Field 1 outfield repairs.
Schaefer-Meyer Seed and Sod.
Schaefer-Meyer Seed and Sod.
Second. Okay, any other comments, conversation? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Move in the citizen comment. All right, seeing no new business, this meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody.